So starting on page 229, Kit looked down at the tip of William's great boot. "What do you mean by a fresh start?" she asked quietly. "I mean that it is well over. The widow Tupper is gone, and it won't be necessary to see much of the Croft child. Don't you agree, Kit, that from now on it would be wise to use a little more judgment about people? Mind you, I'm not speaking against charity," he went on, seeking her mouth opening to protest. "We are supposed to care for the poor, but you overdo it, Kit." "But it wasn't charity," Kit burst out. "Hannah and Prudence, they are my friends." "That's just what I mean. We're judged by the company we keep, and in our position people look to us for an example of what is right and proper. And I'm to set an example by turning my back on my friends." Kit's eyes glittered. "Oh, Kit," pleaded William miserably, "I didn't want to quarrel with you tonight, but try to see it from my side. It would make a man uneasy never knowing what his wife would do next. It would make a wife uneasy never knowing whether she could depend on her husband," Kit answered levelly. William had the grace to flush, but he held stubbornly to his position. A month ago Kit's temper would have flared, but all at once she realized that William could not really anger her. She had had a long time to think. That night on the river bank, and the longer night in the constable's shed. She had never consciously made any decision, but suddenly there it was, waiting and unmistakable. "'Tis no use, William," she said now. "You and I would always be uneasy all our lives. We would always be hoping for the other one to be different, and always be disappointed when it didn't happen. No matter how hard I tried, I know I couldn't never care about the things that seemed so important to you." "The house isn't important to you?" he asked slowly. "Yes, in a way it is," she admitted. "I'd like to live in a fine house, but not if it means I have to be an example. Not if it means I can't choose my own friends." William, too, had been doing some thinking. He did not seem surprised, only gravely regretful. "Perhaps you're right, Kit," he conceded. "I've hoped all this year that you would forget your odd ways and learn to fit in here. If I thought you would just try—" She shook her head. "Then I won't be coming again?" "'Tis no use, William," she repeated. At the door he turned and looked back, his face baffled and unhappy. There was in his eye just the merest flicker of the look she had seen there on the first morning outside the meeting-house. In that instant Kit knew that she had only to speak one word or to stretch out her hand, but she did not speak, and presently William opened the door and was gone. Now the long evenings around the hearth were seldom relieved by any visitor. For hours on end the whir of the spinning wheel and the twang of the loom were the only sounds, except for an informal bow of greeting on the Sabbath morning and on lecture day. Kit did not see William again till the day of the Thankful Peabody's wedding. Thankful's wedding was the first festivity Wethersfield had ever enjoyed since the sickness. Through drifts of snow waist-high, by sleigh and sled and snowshoe, young people and old folks and children gathered in the spacious Peabody house, relieved to shake off the labor and anxiety of the past weeks and to rejoice with the happy couple. The feast spread out on the board would be talked of for weeks to come. There were apple and mince and dried berry pies, little spice cakes with maple sugar frosting, candied fruits and nuts, pitchers of sweet apple cider, and great mugs of steaming flip for men. 7 different kinds of cake, Judith counted surreptitiously. "I'll never be able to have anything half so grand at my wedding." Kit scarcely heard her. She was remembering the last wedding she had attended. Could it be only a year ago in Barbados? She could shut her eyes and see the long damask-covered tables set with gold and silver plate. The banquet had lasted for hours. Light from crystal chandeliers had twinkled back from gold braid and jewels. Deep windows had opened out on curving formal gardens, and the sea breezes had filled the room with the scent of flowers. An almost intolerable loneliness wrapped Kit away from the joyous crowd. She was filled with a restlessness she could not understand. What was it that plagued her with this longing to turn back? Was it that far-off memory of elegance and beauty, or was it just the look in Thankful's eyes as she stood radiant in her rose-colored, lustring wedding dress and listening to the toasts to her future. Kit and Judith, each lost in her own thoughts, stood together near the wall, unable to join in the merrymaking from across the room. William watched them gravely, making no move. When the bride and groom had driven off in their sleigh toward the snug new house that awaited them, the guests turned back to the laden tables. Two fiddlers in the corners scraped a lively tune, and some of the more daring young people began to dance. No one paid attention to the two tardy guests who appeared at the door, letting in a gust of wind, till suddenly a woman screamed and threw her arms about a snow-covered figure. Then abruptly the music stopped and the laughter was checked, and everyone crowded about the newcomers. They were two Wethersfield men returned from Massachusetts with a detachment of militia. The story they had to tell put a somber end to the happy evening. Of the detachment of 20, only 8 had come back to Hartford, just south of Hadley, before they could reach Deerfield. They had been ambushed by Indians who attacked savagely with bow, arrows, and French rifles. 4 men had been killed outright, and 2 others had died of wounds on the trail. The rest had been surrounded and taken captive. For a few days the survivors had attempted to follow the Indians till a heavy snowfall had made it impossible to go on. They had found the scalped body of one of the captives lying by the trail, and they had little hope that in the weather any of the prisoners would have been spared. They had turned back and made their way on snowshoes, barely reaching Hadley before another blizzard. So that was 2:28 to 2:33.